It's time for Bring Your Own Lunch. Personal stories about the business with my daddy, Dave T. Koenig.
All right, come on in, have a seat, welcome. This is the Bring Your Own Lunch podcast at BringYourOwnLunch.com, the magic of iTunes, the majesty of Stitcher, and however you found your way to download this podcast, I thank you. As you heard at the top, my name is Dave T. Koenig. I'm an actor, writer, director, producer, comedian. I am full of roast beef and homemade mac and cheese. And of course, I'm the host of the podcast you're listening to right now. BYOL is the hashtag we use if you want to reach out on social media, because that's always fun. Facebook.com/BringYourOwnLunch. You can follow us on Twitter at BYOL Podcast. You can connect with us on Instagram at Bring Your Own Lunch. And of course, we have our own website, BringYourOwnLunch.com, where you can find out all the information about the guests on the show, past, present, and future, presumably. And you can send me a personal email, Dave at BringYourOwnLunch.com, because I always love to connect with people, because you never know what's going to happen to the people you connect with today. You never know where they will end up, or what they will end up doing, or what they will get themselves involved with. And that sort of is the theme of this week's podcast. My guest this week is my friend Candace Holdorf. Now, Candace and I met 7 years ago, something like that. We both did a play in New York City called Keeping Abreast, and it was a very meaningful play. It was a play that was about breast cancer, and as I'm sure you have somebody in your life who is a woman, breast cancer is a really important subject to always keep at the forefront, and remember that it's a big killer of women, and it also affects men, of course. But be part of a show that has a greater meaning was very interesting to me, and it was a great cast. There was some really awesome people involved. It's one of those cases where I don't want to name one necessarily without mentioning everybody, because everybody in the cast was really, really good, and I've kept in touch with a large number of them. It was directed by Rebecca Trent, who many may know in New York as the owner and operator of The Creek and the Cave. Now, at the time, that was a restaurant and bar that featured live music, and people would go there to just hang out. But Rebecca had this idea in her head that she was going to turn this little theater space that she had adjacent to the bar area and restaurant area into a comedy venue. This was before any of that happened, that we were doing this project, Keeping Abreast. But I thought it was really a great idea, and at the time, this place is in Long Island City, and it didn't really have much going on in the area at the time, especially for comedy. It was all still very Manhattan-based. Some of it had gone to Brooklyn, but for the most part, everything was happening in Manhattan. And then once Rebecca decided to sink her teeth into the idea of making that a comedy venue, it's taken off, and it is one of the most vibrant and vital comedy venues in all of New York City right now. In fact, it was just written up in Playboy. But the play actually starred a pre-famous, not yet her, Amy Schumer, who I think we all could tell was on her way to doing big things, and as it turns out, she was. Very ambitious, a very talented actor. She held that entire thing together, and the rest of the cast kind of floated in and out of her life, her character's life in that play. And I had a couple of scenes with Amy, and they were really good. I really enjoyed it, and Rebecca brought a great cast together, and we all enjoyed it. And one of the cast members of Keeping Abreast that I really thought was amazing was Candace Holdorf. We'll go into the reasons why I thought it was really a fascinating performance in many ways during the course of the interview, but I always felt she was a very gutsy, very, very brave performer. And as I'd found out later, I didn't know half the story. I just thought she was just somebody who was willing to put herself on the line out there. But now I find out, and you'll find out through this interview, that she has had a lot happen to her, and she's gone through a lot, and she's had her battles with, in her case, eating disorder. And the nice thing is, talking to her today, she has resolved a lot of those issues, and she finds herself happier and more productive than she's ever been. And not only is she continuing to act, but for me, this is it's fun, but it's a little unnerving for me because not only is she an actor, she is a writer, and a teacher of sexuality and orgasm. Now, if you know anything about me, and if you've listened to this podcast, you know I choose my words fairly carefully. I don't curse a lot, and I certainly am not overly open about personal stuff. I don't mind sharing relevant stuff if we're talking about relevant stuff, but I'm not the guy who's going to start talking about what many would consider to be private issues. So when I'm confronted with somebody who is very open about so-called private issues, for me, it's like, whoa, man, that's so amazing. I don't know if that I'll ever possess a fraction of the openness that Candace has, but I admire it. I think it's awesome, and I think it's great that she's helping other people open up and get more in touch with themselves and their bodies. And so we have a really interesting conversation, not just about the acting aspect of her life, and we certainly get into the serious aspect of her life that involved battling an eating disorder, but we also talk about the stuff she's doing with sexuality. And for me, it's fun to listen to. It's exciting. It makes me a little bit nervous and a little bit anxious to make that part of the show, but I think it's a good thing. I think it's a growth thing, and I think the show grows, and I think you grow with me, and I think I've already put myself in a situation where I can make way too many innuendos. Needless to say, this particular episode is not safe for work, and it's probably not something that you want to listen to around young kids. We don't get graphic or dirty or anything like that, but certainly it's subject matter that may not be appropriate for all audiences. So let me just say that way before we get into the interview and hear about all the amazing things that Candace is involved with. And I think it's going to open up some eyes and hopefully will help some people because there's a lot of that to what Candace does, and I'm excited to share this with you. By the way, my interview with Candace, she's out in San Francisco, so this one was recorded via Skype, and my first attempt at doing that, and I think it turned out really well. I'd love some feedback if you have any comments about how well the whole Skype thing works out. I would love to hear it from you, because feedback is great, and it would be a big help to know whether or not that's something that could work for the future. For me, a couple quick notes. Had a very, very fascinating weekend. I guess it started Thursday, and I can now say that I was not cut out of that episode of Allegiance on NBC. They cut about half of the appearance out, which I thought may happen, but there I was in that episode. It was a co-star role, and I was very glad to have it. It looked amazing. I've got a screenshot that's going to go up on the podcast in the show notes for this episode, and yeah, I'm thrilled. I can't really say too much more than that. If you're a fan of the show, it's a relatively new show, so it was only episode 4, and I'm not sure if it's going to have an extended run, but if you're a fan of the show or you happen to watch that episode, I'd love to hear what you think and thought of the show and of my very, very, very brief but very meaningful appearance on the show. Anyway, the rest of the weekend, I had a great time because I got involved with a couple of events at the Ensemble Studio Theater, or EST as the devotees call it. And I was hipped to some of the stuff by Mike Smith Rivera, who was my guest on the show a couple of episodes ago. Mike and his wife, Kelly Ann Burns, Mrs. Clown, they co-host a variety show at the Ensemble Studio Theater called Last Call. And it's really, as it sounds, it's a variety show. And Mike told me about it several months ago. And I was like, and then when I heard about it, I was like, oh, so people just do whatever? And he's like, yeah, people do music, people do, art stuff, and people do monologues and maybe poetry, whatever. I said, oh, great, I can do my beat poetry. And he said, okay, great, yeah, we'd love to have you on. And he got so enthusiastic about it that I couldn't really admit to him at the time that I have never done beat poetry. Yet, here I was, and I was roped in, and I had opened my big mouth, but I thought of it as a great challenge. So, spent a little bit of time putting my act together, and I think I came up with a fairly decent presentation. You may not be surprised to find out that I did not do it on a serious level. I kind of used it as an opportunity for comedy, And based on the response I got, it really worked out. And I was very relieved, very happy. And I am very grateful to Mr. and Mrs. Clown for hosting that event. And from there, I heard about the next day at Ensemble Studio Theater, they have something called First Brew, which is an opportunity for script writers to connect with actors and put their stuff up on a stage as a staged reading. The way Mike described it, it's kind of like doing a pick a basketball game where people just pick their teams and throw them up, and rather than playing each other through acting, although that would be interesting, you just present your play or your snippet of a play. And that happens 6 times, and people enjoy it. And there's been a lot of people who have come to those events, and it's got a great response. And they celebrated their 2-year anniversary at First Brew, and I was happy to be part of it. I was actually picked to be in a play, a reading of a scene of a play. Actually, it's a pilot, I should say. And I had a great time. So it was a very successful weekend for me. And I have to thank everybody at EST and Mr. and Mrs. Clown and the fine folks behind the First Brew. And I'm looking forward to going back because I think they do a great job there. It's a great environment, and it felt like a place that I want to invest a little more time in. So like I said at the beginning, sometimes you just never know where people go after you meet them. Before we get into the interview, let me thank Banooba, banooba.net, Banooba. I certainly know where to find them. They're online. You can go to their site. You can download some of their music. You can find out where they will be playing live. They are the people who provide the music at the beginning, middle, and end of the show, and they are fantastic. So please do check them out. And if you like what you hear, I would love it if you would go to iTunes or to Stitcher and rate this show. Give it 5 stars if you'd like. Give it 5 stars, and then write a review with some glowing positive comments about what you've heard. If you don't like the show, shut up. But if you do like the show, please help us out by going to iTunes. It just helps us bring more people to the show. We've kind of upped our number of reviews lately, which is awesome, and we could always use some more. So please, if you have a second today, just go to iTunes, rate, review, and then subscribe to the show so that iTunes knows to tell other people that we're doing a decent job, because I love that. All right, so let's get into it with Candace Holdorf, actor, writer, sexual guru, Burning Man regular, San Franciscan. All right, here's Candace. Enjoy. So being in San Francisco now makes you an existentialist.
Or just completely full of bullshit.
Well, I don't know. You tell me. I've never been to San Francisco. I haven't had the... No.
You haven't? Okay. I'm curious, what's your perception of it?
Well, it's all hippies.
Yeah, and tech people now.
It's all techies and hipster. Not hipsters. Hippies.
Yes,
which is
but you were right too. There's hippies, there's techies, and there's hipsters as well. But you're very right. It's definitely all hippies out here. I've become one of them. In fact, when you had said just before you started recording, you'd said like, I wish we were rolling. I totally took that to mean you wished you were on some sort of expansive experience rather than you were. I was like. What? And then I was like, oh, that's what happens in San Francisco. Your mind goes straight to that, like, hippy-dippy, expansive experience shit.
I think that beautifully sets up the tone of what I expect this conversation to be. Me coming from a very sheltered, innocent place, and I mean this with entirely positive connotation, that you are a very open, a very honest, and you're engaged in a lot of things that some people would consider to be private stuff, but you are more open about it than most people I ever knew. So like I said when we set this thing up, that there's going to be a certain amount of tension, and I can only imagine, and I can only hope that it will be entertaining for people to experience my anguish through the beauty of podcasting.
All right.
So how long have you been in?
You're kind of a masochist then, but anyway, let's
Does that describe me as a I think I own that a little bit.
No, I know. No, I think it's great.
Okay.
I love it. I'm really excited. I think you're very playful, and I'm excited to see what bubbles up from here. So thank you for having me on.
Oh, well, I've known you for a long time now, and I think one of my first memories of you, just to sort of set the tone also, is that you and I were in a play. It was a play about breast cancer. And you played someone who did an art piece where you were, I guess, a partial mastectomy patient. Is that
yes?
Okay.
Yeah. One of my breasts had been removed in the play.
In the play, and you do this performance piece topless. Now, some people would go to rehearsal and they're like, "Well, I don't need to be topless. It's just rehearsal." But you were so like, "I'm in this. I'm doing this." So you rehearsed topless. And I thought that was such a gutsy, like ballsy thing to do that I immediately admired you as a performer and as a person. So what about you says, okay, if I'm going to be rehearsing and I'm doing this thing where I'm supposed to be topless, I'm going to do a topless even if it's rehearsal. What about you makes that happen?
Well, thank you, first of all, for that reflection. It's interesting. I kind of didn't know that you saw me that way, and I appreciate that. So I just want to acknowledge that.
Well, you were topless at the time, so I think maybe they got mixed up in the translation.
I know, right? It's like, hi, can I shake your hand? No.
Yeah. You're awesome.
But to answer your question, the first thing that popped into my mind was, honestly, my first job as an actor is to do justice to the character given to me. And my fear when I first read the piece was, oh God, I don't want to come off as like trying. You gotta go full hog on something like that. Otherwise you're kind of just halfway like, oh, whatever. I'm kind of a cancer patient. I mean, we're talking about cancer.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there was a great seriousness to what we were doing. And I think we all kind of bore that responsibility. So what you're saying, I mean, it makes perfect sense. I mean, you can't go halfway and honestly do justice to a serious subject like cancer. I just think the fact that you were willing to expose yourself in so many different ways was to me, a challenge to become a better performer and more open and stuff like that. And I guess like 6 short years later, this podcast is step 2.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
When I saw that you were doing this, I was like, oh my gosh, this is of course perfect for you.
Well, I appreciate it.
It is. Yeah. It's you putting out, cause you're so funny. Oh my God. Like every time you post this like wry shit on Facebook, I'm like, oh my God, I wish I could come up with like writing like that or wit like that. It's really
I appreciate
great.
that. Well, it's I mean, at the risk of making this a mutual love fest, I do want to investigate your history and because I know your story to a certain degree, and I think there's probably more I don't know. But I think your personal, it's going to sound really frou-frou, but it's like your personal journey is really fascinating, and I think can be really enlightening for a lot of people who go through stuff. So let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, but my dad was in the Army, he was an enlisted man. So I moved around a bit for the first 7 years of my life. Part of it, Jacksonville and Kentucky, and I lived in Germany for 2 years as actually at the time it was West Germany, so I'm dating myself a little bit.
Oh wow!
So it was really. I was just really grateful as a 5 to 7 year old. Even at the time, somehow I knew that being out of the United States was a gift because I got this whole other experience of what life was like outside of our little U.S. bubble. And I got to experience different cultures and, because we were on an Army base, there were people from all over the world. And,
wow.
So then I went back to Atlanta when I was 7. And I went all the way through high school there. And, when I was 17, I packed up my bags for the big New York City and, went to college at NYU. and then was in New York for 13 years and had a whole life there. And then 3 years ago-ish, I came over to San Francisco.
All right, so we're going to break that up a little bit. When you're in Atlanta, I mean, you had that sort of whirlwind experience, and up until 7 years old, like my daughter's almost 7, and seeing it sort of through her filter, I can see how it sort of feels like maybe instability, but it probably just seemed like fun, and it didn't necessarily have a negative on you because you don't set roots that early. So, and then you did have a chance to have stability for like those 10 years after, right?
Yeah.
What do you think had more of an influence? Sort of like the earlier part where you were the Army brat, or was it when you had that chance to sit still for 10 years?
Well, I would say as an actor, maybe the trajectory of my life came to be thanks to the stability being in Atlanta, because that was when I really dove into acting and all that stuff. And I would say that maybe the first 7 years kind of defines maybe more the core of who I am. You know, it's interesting for me to be 9, 10, whatever years old, and seeing the wall fall in Germany and being so deeply impacted by that at such a young age.
Sure.
And I mean, like, I can't even imagine what it must have been like for people who'd been behind the wall for years and years and years.
Sure.
And years
or had their family
years.
separated by that artificial boundary.
Yeah. So for me, it kind of touched into the core that I am who I am, is, you know, there's some sort of like ethic or something in me that knows that we need to be paying more attention to what's going on outside, you know, and it's kind of like almost an activist spirit in me that I feel I owe to the first 7 years of my life.
Interesting. And I think you do kind of develop that later, at least in my knowledge of you. But when you're in Atlanta, where exactly? Was it in Atlanta itself, or was it a suburb?
No, it was in Atlanta itself. And that was another great experience because I went to a school that was very mixed and blended with many different, not just races, but nationalities. There were a lot of immigrant students. So I was just really blessed to have the first 17 years of my life be touched with such a level of diversity, and also, you know, LBGT diversity as well. You know, Atlanta proper is a very, you know, very melting pot of amazing people. And then to come to New York.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I've been really blessed. And I think it's something that maybe we in America, especially suburbia, don't get to have that experience too often. I think it's a vital piece that we need.
I agree. I think the more people are exposed to people of all kinds, the more you realize that, you know, the outside part is just not nearly as important as what's inside. That's how I kind of grew up similar, surrounded by people. I had friends of a lot of different nationalities, and I think that helped me cut down on any tendency to want to say us versus them. And the fact that my dad was Jewish, my mom was Catholic, that also helped too. So I think I agree with you 100% on all that stuff. So you came up to New York to go to theater school, but did you have a kind of experience with performing or anything like that when you were younger?
Yeah, for sure. Well, how appropriate. I think I was 5 or 6 or whatever. I think it was the first time I ever had that, you know, that experience. You're in your kindergarten or first grade class, and you're doing your thing. And we were doing the whole Chicken Little thing, and I was cast as Lucy Goosey.
Lucy Goosey, of course.
Yes, of course. And that was the first time that I was like, I'm really enjoying this, you know. And then in 5th grade, I was Charlotte in Charlotte's Web, and that was kind of like, I really like doing this. But the first time I really got serious as far as like, this is something that I want to pursue, was right around my junior, or maybe my sophomore year, but really definitely my junior year solidified it of high school. You know, we did a, if you can imagine, a 1-act version of Macbeth, my sophomore year.
The one with the happy ending.
Yes, exactly. And you know, the whole song and dance and hello, my baby. Okay. But
Hamlet light.
Yeah, exactly. But we did that, and it was just, it was really awesome to, I had a small role, but it was very cool to see my school try that and put it on. And then my junior year of high school, I was cast as the lead in our spring play. I was Auntie Mame in Auntie Mame.
The play version, not the musical? The
play version.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was when I was like, oh, I can memorize lines and I like really well, and I can, make people laugh, or, I can. So, that was just when I was like, yeah, I'm doing this. There was no turning back. And I remember I only applied to 3 colleges, and only one of them was a theater school. The other 2 were, I was going to study biology, and the last one was like, well, if everything goes to shit, at least I can go there. But I was like, if the theater school accepts me, it's the only place I wanted to go. That was NYU, Tisch. I was like, I only want to go there.
Wow.
I feel very, very naive looking back on that, because of course, there are people, it's like, if you're really serious about theater, you go to Northwestern and Yale and Harvard, and I don't know why I didn't even invest in anything else. I just knew, I was like, I'm going to NYU, and if I don't, then I'm staying in Atlanta to study biology, and that's going to be my life. And NYU was like,
NYU said yes. What was it about NYU? Do you remember what it was that said, hey, that's the one, or just what was it that made NYU the be all end all?
Honestly, because a guy that who was a really great actor the year ahead of me got accepted there, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, he went to NYU!" So I was like, I'm going to do that. And also, it was right in the center of New York. It wasn't even Columbia has a little campusy experience. Mm-hmm. NYU has nothing like that. It's just like,
yeah, you're on the streets of New York all the time.
Exactly. And something about that was just like, fuck yeah, let's do New York.
Did you have any experience? Well, I mean, you were kind of a traveler anyway. So being away from your normal roots was probably felt more natural to you than a lot of people who just grew up in one town and stay there until they go away. But had you been exposed to New York at all up to that point?
Yeah, I'd been twice, I'd been twice. And then after I got accepted, I went up one more time to just kind of like experience it. But yeah, I went there. My grandmother used to live in New Jersey for a few years when I was like 9 or 10, and I would spend my summers with her. So I would go up to Jersey, and she, her son still lives there. My uncle still lives on the Upper East Side. And I remember one time he pulled out his Goldwing motorcycle and he took me around New York City on the back of his Goldwing as a 10-year-old.
Wow.
It was pretty rad.
That's a pretty cool experience.
Yeah. And then when I was 16, we went up for our school, like, spring break trip. And that was when I saw my first Broadway shows. The first show I ever saw was Whoopi Goldberg in A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum.
Oh, wow. That's unique.
Yeah. Well, I saw that. And then I also saw, Callus, the singer Callus, but I saw Dixie Carter in it. And I just was like, oh my God, this is acting. This is it.
This is the thing, man.
I saw Chicago. Like, we saw like 4 Broadway shows, and Chicago, like the original revival, whatever. Mm-hmm. But, B.B. Newworth. And I was just blown away. And that was my junior year. And I think that also just was like solidified the fact that, well, this is where it's happening. So I got to go to school here.
That's, you took a fairly prescribed route to get into acting. But I think those exposures you have early on are so important to the process. It doesn't matter what age you are, but as you're developing your own personality, your own identity, you look back on it. It's like, yeah, of course, those moments are the ones that really drew me to do what I want to do. It's really interesting to look back that way.
Yeah. And what I love about it is that when I was being affected and drawn, as I reflect now, it wasn't about like, I want to be center stage too. I mean, there's obviously a little of that. There's the big flash and the flare, but I really remember I really remember looking at these performers and being like, I want to have that level of craftsmanship and believability. And so I felt more drawn to their craft than I was to the flash.
Interesting. So having said that, did NYU do a good job of preparing you and giving you that sense of handicraft?
I think NYU did a good job of giving me some craft and some tools to work with. I went for 3 years. I actually graduated a year early because I wanted to get out and just start working as soon as possible.
How'd you manage that? Isn't it? I mean, because you must have put in extra time.
Well, I only took one summer school class, but I had a lot of credits from AP courses when I was in high school. Yeah, I did quite well in several classes and several tests there. And, so I just was like, great. Well, this calculus and this history and this English covers all that. So, and I only took one summer school course on film, and everything else was done. So,
wow. Good for you. Now, you said you went up there at 17. Did you graduate high school early, or were you just like a late birthday?
Oh, it's just kind of a late birthday. My birthday is September 7th. So basically like a week and a half before I turned 18 was when I moved. So
it wasn't like you finished early and you went to college a year early. It was just that you finished college early.
Yeah.
What other experiences can you remember from NYU, or was it just like, theater?
Well, it's definitely all theater. And I recall, actually the one class that there's like a class that most people have to take and everyone hates it, hates these. They're called MAP classes. And essentially the class was writing workshop. And that was the first year or so you have to take these kind of required NYU classes. I have no idea if it's the same way or not. But I remember everyone being like, oh, we have to do the writing workshop. Da, da, da. And I loved that class. I was just like, wow, it really was an opportunity for me to write, which I'm sure we'll probably talk about later. But it was really my first time. I mean, I had kind of written stuff when I was like, I'm a teenager and my heart is broken. Here's my broken-hearted poetry, But it was my first time to really turn a critical eye towards towards philosophers and things like that. So I just remember really enjoying, I think that was a really informative experience, actually, as a performer. I'm sure you agree. As a performer, it's not just like, well, I'm getting on stage now and doing, it's like you got to understand humanity and human history. And
absolutely. I think not only that, just understanding what goes into the other side of the production process is really good too. What it takes to write a good story or how to craft a sentence, just to appreciate what everybody else is doing while you're up there, hogging up the spotlight.
Right. Well, if you can recognize incredible language, then you as an actor will only, through your craft, enhance that and inform that,
Yeah. And I think it's good for collaboration too. I mean, if you want to get on a writer's good side to know what it takes to write a script,
totally,
and appreciate the hard work that goes into it, then they might actually push for you to do more. So it's not a bad strategy all around.
Yeah, and I appreciate that at NYU, and also at NYU you had to kind of do some like theater production work. So I remember my first year helping out in the costume shop, and you had to be there for all the shows to take care of the costumes. Mm-hmm. So I did appreciate that there was an experience of being on the other side of the curtain where you're actually backstage, and that helps you appreciate, those people more and more, and, it gets you out of your head, out of your ass, and out of your diva-ness,
Was there anybody in the program at the time who is still around, is still plugging away, or who were you there with?
I guess probably the biggest person out of my class, at least there's several conservatories within NYU, and I went to Stella Adler Conservatory. And out of Stella Adler Conservatory, the person who was in my class, probably the most successful so far, I would say right now, is Casey Wilson.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. She was on SNL, and she's got a couple TV shows going on, and it's really great to see her. She's always been such a funny girl. So funny lady now, funny woman. Mm-hmm. And so it's really great to see her doing things.
Yeah, and she went through UCB, so I guess she only got, I'm only guessing she got involved right out of college, but you said you were itching to get out early so you can get right to work. Now, when you finished up NYU, we say like, oh, I want to be an actor, but that could mean so many different things. Did you have a game plan? Did you know what you wanted to try and do right out of school, or how did you approach that?
Yeah, I think I've always been kind of like I'm gonna do it myself kind of person, which is good in some ways, and also can to a fault can be a fault. But,
I so relate to that, by the way.
Totally.
Oh my God, yeah. I was just having a conversation about that last night, where it's like, I can be really, really stubborn. Mm-hmm. And so how did you resolve that, or how did you continue on like that? Yeah.
So the first thing that I did was I don't know if I'm sure many people who are in New York remember Manhattan Theater Source. Mm-hmm. And it was
but just for people who might not know, how would you describe Manhattan Theater Source to people?
Well, it's just it's a little theater on 8th Street. It's pretty accessible. It's a place for people. I know that they have, like play readings and stuff, and then they have like little festivals. It's just a great place to come, and like somehow you'll find an entry point to workshop your work or try some stuff out, or put something up. And so when I investigated them, someone had mentioned it to me. In fact, it might have even been Casey, now that I'm thinking about it. Someone was like, Manhattan Theater Source, that's a good place to look at when you're first starting out. And they had a series called the Flop Nights series. And the Flop Nights series meant you could use their facility for free. They would just take the box office, but you didn't have to pay to use it, which is great. And you could put on a show for 3 nights on a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, which are, the flop nights, the nights that, most theaters are dark. Mm-hmm. And so I submitted an application saying, this is the play that I want to do. And I cast 3 of my friends at the time who we just finished school, or some of them were just finishing up. And then we got a director who we met through one of my castmates, and we put on a show. And that was my first experience, was producing and, applying for and getting this space and showcasing ourselves.
Did you always have sort of that, entrepreneurial spirit to you? Because I know it applies to now, but even back then, it sounds like you were like, hey, I'm just going to do it. Like you said, you're going to do it your own way. Did you always have that sort of mindset of, hey, I'm going to do this?
Yeah, it's, I can immediately recall in our high school, we had, probably our most famous graduate from my high school was Alfred Urey, who wrote, Driving Miss Daisy and Parade. And, we, as, my high school drama teacher and English teacher and some of the students, we all were like, let's update this theater, because we have an awesome theater, brewing here, theater group. And so we raised a bunch of money to I don't know, it might have been like 50 plus grand or whatever, to actually refurbish the entire theater and to get new lights and to basically update the whole thing. And that was, in high school. That was me being a part of, I always love that feeling of being a part of something greater. And maybe that's why I love plays and films too, because it's, it's not just you in a vacuum. It's like, all right, I'm a part of this bigger thing. But then it was great to help raise money. And then Alfred Urey actually came to our school when we blessed it or inaugurated it or opened it. And I got to perform a scene from Driving Miss Daisy, for him. Wow. And it was pretty awesome. So yeah, I've always kind of had this all right, if I make a decision, we're going to do it, and who's on board?
Well, it sounds well that when we get into what you're doing, some of the stuff you're doing now, that's going to seem even funnier.
Okay.
So you had that one experience at Manhattan Theater Source. What other kind of stuff were you getting involved with out of school?
Well, I'd say probably, my biggest project, and well, there's two, but one of my biggest, and that I'm really proud of because it's continuing today, was I was one of the co-founders of one of 7 who co-founded Flux Theater Ensemble, which is an off Broadway or independent theater group that produces just gorgeous work. And that started around 2005 when I actually helped stage manage my friend August Schulenberg, one of his plays at Theater for the New City. And he and the director and me and a couple of the people were all like, wow, this gelled together really. Let's continue. And then we started doing writing retreats once a year, and then we eventually built Flux Theater Ensemble, and I was the marketing director as well as a performer in several of the shows up until 2010, when I started to kind of step away from performing a little bit to kind of go through my own internal process, which we can get into in a bit. So there was that. And then in 2007, at the 2007 New York Fringe Festival, I co-wrote and co-produced with 7 other really awesome women a play based on mine and my castmates' experiences with eating disorders, which I had for 7 years of my life. I had a very severe eating disorder, and several of these women did as well. And we performed that at the 2007 Fringe, and we performed it at a couple colleges, and even now to this day, colleges can still perform our play if they want. And every once in a while, maybe once every couple of years, I'll get a little check or something as part of my payment. Yeah, like a payment because some college put on our show. So that's really sweet. So those are the 2 things I'm most proud of as far as acting wise that I was very entrepreneurial about. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, you touched on, I figure now maybe, we can start talking a little more seriously about the reason you stepped away from acting, and you can feel free to share or not share however much you want of this stuff. I just happen to know you tend to be a little more open again than a lot of people I know. But what was happening?
It's already on the internet anyway. So
so I guess there's no harm in asking. What was going on for you at that time? Because you were sort of on a trajectory, and you could tell me better than I could tell you that you were on a specific trajectory, and that it seemed from my perspective that you just really went through this big sort of upheaval internally. So what was going on professionally, and then at the same time, what was going on personally?
Right. So right around the end of 2008 was when my marriage to my husband at the time ended. And at that time, I had already been anorexic for 7 years. I was like towing the 100-pound line or whatever. And it was really it was really painful. That was happening for me personally. And it was the biggest things. And I basically, he's an awesome human being, so it's not anything like to do with him, but it had to end. And within 3 days, I had moved all of my stuff into the basement of a Brooklyn church. And for 6 weeks, I bounced around a bunch of different people's houses. And this was, during December and January. So basically all of the holidays and the New Year, I was like homeless and crying. And I was crying every day. I think I binge watched the entire Sex and the City series in like 2 days.
Wow.
So there was that. And at the same time, I was also really confronting my eating disorder, because I was like, this has ruined my life. This is, I gotta get healthy. I have to get healthy. Otherwise, everything that's important to me, which at the time was centered around my career, is gone. It's not going to exist, And at the time, I had just professionally, I had just finished, Flux Theater Ensemble had just finished a trilogy, which I starred in one of the plays in that. And in the year following, as I was confronting my eating disorder and getting healthier-ish, or at least like getting into my brain, I did 3 plays and I starred in an independent film and I was writing like crazy. So at the same time, while my life was in upheaval, I was really professionally and creatively fertile.
And I've never dealt with an eating disorder, and so all my questions come out of ignorance more than anything else. When you and I were working together on that play that we were talking about, you and I talked about nutrition, and I looked at you, and from the outside, it seemed like you just were worried about eating healthy. So I didn't personally have any concept as to whether or not you were going through anything in terms of an eating disorder. It just seemed like you were eating more healthy than I was by any standard whatsoever. So what did what form did your eating disorder take? As somebody who doesn't really, I know what they teach you in school, but for you personally, what was it like?
Well, it was like a full-time job because, for me, and many people's anorexia can show up differently, but for me, it looked like having a very controlled amount of food at the same time every day, and not to exceed a certain amount of calories and not to include quote unquote bad foods. So basically it was like a restrictive process. There was all this stuff around how, when, what, why, if I worked out really hard that day, maybe I could have a square of dark chocolate, all this stuff around and all this planning my life around, well, will I be near somewhere where I can have my food or not have my food, or I can't eat at that restaurant because, the only thing I can have is, like lemon water, all this stuff. And it was just, but at the same time, so that's like how the food showed up. But what was really going on was this deep, and we can segue into this later, was this deep fear of my eroticism, of my erotic animal, of my out of control, involuntary, orgasmic, pleasure filled, fuck me now animal.
I don't mean to, because it's quite a segue. Totally. And I do want to talk about that aspect of things. But you said it was affecting your health. In what ways was it starting to show up?
Well, I didn't have my period for a few years.
Wow.
Yeah, because when you reach a certain caloric deficit as females, your body is like, well, we don't have enough nutrition or energy to expend. We gotta keep your heart pumping and your lungs breathing. So, your periods we don't have enough energy or calories to be able to handle that. So I didn't have my period. My hair was really dry and was falling out.
What year did it, I guess, become at its worst?
Yeah. I would say, I had when I first really fell in was probably around the beginning of 2003. And that was, I was 22, 23 at the time. And that was the real thing. And, it had only just started perhaps a year before was when it started to fall into place. And, that I really plummeted hard. And then sometime around 2005, I had a really bigger, deep relapse again that, plummeted me really, really hard. And the rest of the time, while I was, perhaps from the outside, people would like, oh, you're just kind of on the thin side. But, when you think of anorexia, you think of like, oh my God, skin dripping and ribs poking.
Sure.
And I think that's part of the reason why I co-wrote the play with all the lovely ladies, is to show the many faces of eating disorders. Because from the outside, you look great, but you're exercising 5 hours a day, or you're pumping yourself with calories and then you throw it up, which that wasn't mine. I just, never did the bulimic route. But, because most people, they're like, wait, you have an eating disorder? And, so it's to showcase like, oh, maybe there's someone or love who are just, displaying some actions that you might want to keep your eye on, because most people think of like, I'm just going to have celery, once a day, and you're super skinny, and or you look emaciated, and that's. But it's not.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what year you and I were together, and what year was that play?
Like, it might have been like 2007-ish.
Sounds about right. And
that's what I would guess.
Again, it's like, from my perspective, not knowing enough to know you and whether or not you were being healthy with yourself, you just seemed like somebody who was taking care of herself, who was watching what she ate. But how many calories were you eating a day? What were you limiting yourself to?
There's a funny thing in the eating disorder world that we prefer not to name calories and pounds and stuff like that.
Okay.
Because actually it can be, if someone listening to this with an eating disorder can actually be triggered if they're like, oh my God, she's only eating that much. Well, I'm going to eat less.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't want to do that, obviously.
Totally. It's totally fine. But just letting you know that, let's just say it was an amount that most people would be like, oh, are you trying to diet? Like, are you on a crazy, like, rapid diet? Like, why would you only be having that? So it was kind of around there. Like, I was continuously trying to lose weight. Like, that was my brain was like, you have to lose more, you have to lose more, you have to lose more. So that was going on for me.
Right. So, all right. So you decided to tackle two major things. You had your health issue, and then you also had your relationship issue. Yet at the same time, you seem to have sort of exploded artistically. How did those go hand in hand? Because a lot of times, when you go through a tough thing emotionally, mentally, physically, whatever, it takes you away from your work. But it seems like yours maybe pushed you towards work. Am I guessing right?
Yeah, I would say that because the things in my life had cracked me open so much to a level of vulnerability that I had yet to really touch or allow myself to touch. It was really profound. It was an experience that required me, because all this energy had suddenly been freed up. Like I said, like eating disorder is a second job, and the relationship is a whole job. I'm sure your relationship is
good or bad. Yeah, it's a work in progress.
It is, and I mean, right now I'm married, and it's awesome. I love the fact that, like, all right, all this energy is going into this relationship. I love it. But I suddenly had all this energy freed, and I'd been cracked open to a level of vulnerability I'd never experienced. So it's kind of like I am raw and real, and I have all of this energy, and oh my God, I could either implode, because I spent 5 months of my life crying every day after that happened. But I knew in my heart that, like, this is the process we have to go through. Like, I would teach my yoga class, because I was teaching yoga at the time. I taught my yoga class. I'd keep it together for an hour and a half. And as soon as everyone left, I'd go right back into tears.
Wow.
And that, again, that's all that energy freed up came out as tears at the time. So I think that's partially why, and it was a great place for me to, and I was writing poetry. In fact, I'm working on a project now, and some of that poetry is included in there. And it just really, it's like, I think it was the only way I knew how to deal with the level of stuff coming out that I hadn't faced in my life.
Why do you figure you didn't face it prior to that? Have you thought about that since?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing that comes to my mind is because it was the only way I knew how to survive. If I were to actually feel the magnitude of the pain, the grief, the fear, of who I am and what I was, and the stuff that happens in childhood, but actually allow myself to feel that any earlier, I don't know that I could have handled it. I might have gone insane, or but it was, and anorexia is a great way, and any eating disorder and any addiction, quite frankly, is a great way to numb yourself. But I saw it as a survival tactic. It's like, this is the only way I know how to get through my life, because the pain of feeling all that crap from before is going to overwhelm me, until finally the pain, I think it's Anais Nin says, like, the pain, I'm going to mangle this quote, but it's like the pain of living as a tight bud became worse than the pain of actually blossoming. So like the pain of the anorexia finally overtook, or, you know, became greater than the pain of actually hiding from myself. And that's when that switch happened. And then everything that was no longer serving me fell away.
And then the dam broke and you just started pouring out.
Yes.
So part of that was, you mentioned the film you did. That was an affirmative act. Is that the one? Tell me about that project, because I know a little bit about it, but I don't know a heck of a lot. But all I know is that it was, I mean, it's a powerful subject, and you put yourself into it in a very unique way. So what was that project about?
Yeah. So the project was a film based on, you know, gay marriage is still an issue. But it was, I played a woman, a lesbian woman, who decided to dress as a man and live as a man in order to marry her partner and to adopt a child together, you know, because my partner and I wanted to have a family, but, you know, for all the crazy ass reasons, you know, we couldn't, because we were two women, and adopting as a gay couple is not as easy. And so, you know, I took on the role of, I'm going to live as a man so I can have these things. And then, but that's just it's really just the very beginning of the story. And, you know, quickly into the film, she is discovered for who she is. And basically she's arrested because she lied. She lied on her legally and she's been lying for these past few years, and she's arrested for lying and perhaps even child endangerment and, you know, all this stuff. And so the film travels through her journey and really also her lawyer's journey. It looks at the lawyer a lot on cause he's kind of like, whatever, two lesbians, who cares? And, you know, and then it's through working with them that he's like, actually, this is bullshit. And, you know, we need to stand up against this and make gay marriage illegal. And, so that was basically.
What kind of response did you get from that one?
Well, the film was a great challenge for me. You know, we only shot days, and I definitely got a lot of like, wow, you really put yourself out there. You really like, a lot of people were like, I didn't even recognize you at first. The first part of it, I cut my hair super short like a very masculine haircut, like, you know, and when I looked at myself in the mirror when they cut my hair, I was like, oh my God, I look like my dad, like exactly like my dad. But it was just so interesting, how gender can be, but that was also, gender can just flow and split, and, you know, with the change of this or that, you can totally just play around with your gender no matter who you are. So I think that was a really interesting experience for me.
Do you think that was part of the recovery from all that stuff you were going through, was like putting on a completely different persona?
Well, yeah, I know that was probably a year after I'd left my husband, and I'd already gained some weight and I was figuring myself out. And I think part of me, what was healing for me was being challenged creatively and really I felt happy, honestly. I think that was it. Like, I just felt happy because here I am acting and trying this thing. And, you know, the film had its good parts and it had quite a number of flaws, for better or for worse. But honestly, the only thing I cared about was growing creatively and, again, doing justice to these people, these women, this issue, and just doing the best performance that I could. And I think I grew a lot as an artist through that process, and that's what mattered most to me. Well,
I guess that brings us to the transition to some of the stuff you're doing now. And you said you had to kind of rediscover yourself, and you kind of hinted at it earlier, although hinting is probably putting it lightly. So, how did you get into doing what you're doing now? in terms of coaching other people to discover themselves?
Yeah. Well, it was right around the time that I was doing the film. It was 2010. And by that point, it was January 2010. And by that point, I had already spent the past year, 2009, that year right after I left my husband. It was my year of fear. And basically I made a fear list, and everything that was on my fear list I was going to do, because deep in my heart I knew what was on the other side of my fear was my desire. Yeah.
What was on this list? I mean, I think you put a blog post about this at one point, so I don't know if it seems like you've kind of let that out, but what was on your list?
Yeah. Well, it ranged from, going to Grimaldi's to eat like as much pizza as I wanted to going to Burning Man, to traveling through Europe by myself, to visiting my dad, who I hadn't seen in some time, so it was really all these things. Because I just wanted to know myself on the other side of all this restrictive crap and all this fear, and to just confront it head on.
Why were you afraid of Burning Man?
I wasn't afraid of Burning Man. It was more like I had only heard about it peripherally. Now it's so mainstream. Everything's on the freaking Simpsons. But back at the time, it was like, oh my God, there's this like magical place. I only knew one person when I went to Burning Man in 2009 for the first time. I've been 6 times since then, but back then I only knew one person, and basically he was like, just get to San Francisco, bring some clothes, I'll have everything else for you. And I was like, I have no idea what this is or what it's about. I just hear that it's like adult Disneyland. And
I've never been there. I've seen stuff on. I've seen The Simpsons, but I don't. What is it as much Sodom and Gomorrah as they try to hint that it is? But or is it overblown?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the sad thing, is most people, when they think of Burning Man, they just think of like, everyone's fucking and everyone's high. And honestly, for me, it's just so not about that. There's like a certain magic and a certain alchemy, and there's a whole ritual that I love about it. There's the night that the man burns, which is essentially, representative of our ego, our past selves. And then there's the night the next night, the night that the temple burns. And the night that the temple burns is really where we grieve. And, people write like goodbye letters on the temple, or they leave, to like their parents or their loved ones. I mean, it really is like a gorgeous spiritual experience. And for me, that's why I go there. I may not go this year just because I need a year off, but
6 is a lot. So I suppose you can take a year off.
Well, my husband's been for the past 10. So there you go. But the reason I go really is it's kind of this idea of like, let me go right into this week-long crucible to sit in the fire of all this stuff. And sitting in the fire doesn't have to be like, oh my God. It can also be like, wow, I went to this amazing workshop and I met this incredible person. Like, that's another great thing about it, is it's a hot pot of synchronicity. Like you'll be having the worst day ever. It's hot and you're tired and then you're like, fuck it, I'm just going to jump on this art car, and it starts like going around. You're seeing this amazing art, and suddenly this person pops on who you meet, and they end up being like your best friend later. There's just a lot of synchronicity, and the art is just fantastic. You'll never see anything else like it. So while there is the feeling of like, do whatever you want, radical self-expression as far as like, sex and drugs, it's there because, a lot of people are pent up and they need that experience. But what it is for me is really an opportunity to step into, all right, what's going on in my life? What do I need to let go of? And how can I be reborn so I can step back into this world, this San Francisco world, or, this whatever earthly realm, and carry those lessons forward.
All right. So what was it that made you decide to move from New York to San Francisco? Was it that trip, or was it?
No, I mean, I started to gather community. We'll backtrack a little bit. So it was right around 2010 when I was doing that film. that I discovered the sexuality practice that I now practice in my life, and that changed my life. And that practice is called orgasmic meditation.
All right. So you have to like pretend. Well, don't pretend I'm 5. That's gross. I think it's too young to talk to somebody about. But consider me an idiot, which is closer to reality.
Right.
What is orgasmic meditation?
Orgasmic meditation is a partnered practice. And what that means is one person is in the sort of open receptive pose and the other person is more in the active pose. So, on the physical intricate level, one person is stroking the genitals of the other person for a set amount of time. And the point is to simply focus on what's happening in your body. It's an opportunity to let go of, well, I got to get this person off, or I got to make a lot of noises so this guy's feelings aren't hurt, so he thinks he's doing a good job. It's an opportunity to let go of, like, let's try to make a climax happen. It's also an opportunity to expand what we are capable of feeling, and to resensitize your body, be it your clit or be it your finger, to really learn to tune into your body and feel your whole organ, your whole body as a sexual organ.
How did you find that?
Well, I was at a free workshop one night just about, energy or whatever. That was really when I started to get into, like, I need to do more personal growth work. I've done all this fearless. I've kind of like thrown myself in the face of my fears, but let's really start to delve into this spiritual ache that's inside of me. So I went to this free workshop, whatever, just on energy work. And in that workshop, I happened to meet someone who I had briefly met through my time 3 months ago while going through San Francisco through Burning Man. And I was like, oh, he's here. Why is he here? He lives in SF, but he's here. Of course, that's the whole beauty of Burning Man synchronicity. And he was there with a very good friend of his, and they have both since become very good friends of mine, which is really lovely. But at the time, I briefly knew one of the guys, and the other guy was with him. So basically, I was like, oh, I kind of know you. Let's go out and have some whiskey after this, because we're all spiritual, and I think whiskey is a very profound spiritual experience. So let's do it. And so we ended up at a bar, and we start talking, they've been to Burning Man and done all that. And I just was like, yeah, I had this amazing, quite frankly, I had an amazing experience, like sexual experience that had exploded me at Burning Man, because I'd spent, as an anorexic, very, very much afraid of my sexuality and kind of really clamping down hard on that. So we were talking about sex, and the friend.
I had to point something out that's really funny. You and I were talking over Skype, and I prefaced this whole thing by saying you are very open, but I just caught you because we were talking about sex. Like you muted you muted the word sex, which I think is so funny based on everything else you've talked about.
Yeah, it's really true. There's always another level of, like, oh my God, sex is so frightening and scary, and I can't believe that I'm exploring this and talking about it. So it's not a matter of, there's always another level. In fact, I'm working on a piece right now that I'm going to write called Why I Avoid Sex, because it's not just like, oh, I'm ashamed of my body. There's a lot more stuff in, but yeah, thanks for noticing that.
Well, it put things in perspective for me, because I think, we all have our levels, we all have our, and it's not just black or white, it's like, you're not just comfortable about, talking about this stuff. It's like there are intricacies within that, which is really fascinating to me. But why do you think we do that? Why do you think we do that? Because you're somebody who is invested in coaching others. Why do we do this?
Why do we, well, again, you mean like, why do we protect ourselves?
Yeah. Or why do we shy away from it so much? And I say me,
Yeah, no, totally. Well, I think we shy away from it because, sex is, I think Oscar Wilde said, like, sex is never, everything in the world is about sex except for sex. Sex is about power. Like, honestly, sex is about power. And John Patrick Shanley recently put something up on Facebook about like sex is not about sex. And the truth is sex is about like when we come, whatever. When we come in, when we step into the arena of sexuality, it's never just about like, you know, my fingers in the genitals or, you know, the anus or whatever. It's about like, oh my God, who am I as this raw, open, vulnerable being? You know, the question, for me, the question that arises, it's so much deeper. I have to confront the emptiness, the void inside of me that is unhappy and unfulfilled, or that is ecstatic. You know, it becomes like this spiritual portal to all that is erotic, all that is eros. So it's never for me just about like, oh, let's just fuck or whatever. And, you know, it can be like that every once in a while, but everything that I've been hiding from in my life gets completely revealed and brought to the surface through my engagement of orgasm and through sexuality. That's how I engage with sex.
What was it about the Burning Man experience that made it so like life-changing?
Because I had never allowed myself to just fully unleash in that way with someone forever.
Wow.
It was just like, and this person I was with loved everything about who I was and what I was doing. So it was just absolute permission and absolute love. You know, we think of love as like, well, we have to be in love, and to be in love, that means you and I have to be, you know, on the trajectory of being married together forever. And I don't subscribe to that. I actually think you can have a one night stand that is full of love and power and potency and admiration for who you are as just a spiritual human being and who I am. And then you can step away at the end and just hug each other and say, thank you so much for that experience, and move on. And that's what it was for me.
So you were at this bar, you were talking about and and that led you to this orgasmic meditation thing.
Yeah, one of the guy, basically the friend of the guy that I knew was like, we were talking about sex. He's like, well, you know, I used to live in a community in San Francisco, and every day we would wake up and stroke the women to the edge of orgasm, and my whole body just went thunk, like dropped down into the earth, and I just knew whatever that is, I need it, and I need to follow it all the way through to the end of the journey.
That's some pickup line, man.
Yeah. And, you know, and he's an awesome guy, and I'm so glad. And he's in my life just as a beauty. He's actually, like one of my husband's best friends. So it's been a beautiful journey, this whole, you know, web that's been woven through this.
And you obviously did take to it pretty well, because now you're teaching other people to do it.
Yeah.
How did that develop so fast? Well, it seems fast, maybe because I was doing other stuff while you were doing that.
Within 2 days, I was just online looking for something, and I was just like, I wanna see what's happening in New York. You know, it was a year out of my marriage, so I was definitely like, all right. And I'd gone to Burning Man, so I'm like, all right, I'm ready to like get back into things outside of just acting. And like, you know, that was it. I was like, I want to explore people. I want to explore my spirituality. And 2 days later, I went online and I found something happening in New York like that day, sponsored by this organization that teaches this practice. And I was like, oh my, it's a sign. Like it just randomly, I wasn't looking. I was like, that's that group that this guy mentioned. I need to go. So I went, and it was a 4-hour workshop it was a 4-hour silent workshop, which was awesome. Like the facilitators would speak, but the participants couldn't, because we had to learn how to communicate through our energy. It was awesome. And
this was about that orgasmic meditation?
Medication.
If only there were.
I know, right? Well, there is. It's called stroking your genitals. But anyway, It was related to it. There was no nudity. They're very clean and clear about that. Like, you're not going to step into a random workshop where all of a sudden people are naked. There's a lot of, but it was related to that because when we're in an orgasmic state with someone, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this when they've had an incredible sexual experience, you're communicating non-verbally. There's just this back and forth, this like circuit of energy, this circuit of give and take that occurs when you're with someone in that state. And it was a way to practice that level of energetic intimacy and connection without taking your clothes off, which I think is way more the foundation and more about what's most important to me, what I've been teaching. It's so not about like, genitals are great. I love genitals. And I love mine. I feel very blessed that, I have a relationship with my genitals, but,
I'm sorry.
It's awesome. You can laugh. I love it.
I guess it's such a clinical term, but you're talking about this in this loving, San Franciscan way that it crashes in my head.
Totally. Well, it just reminds me of like in Fanny Flagg's Fried Green Tomatoes, and she's trying to like get in touch with her body, and she's like, "All right, everyone, now pull down your panties and let's straddle your mirrors." And like and Kathy Bates is looking at everyone like, "I am not putting the mirror under my pussy right now." And ladies, like it's just it's great. We can laugh about it, and I love it. I love that we have this kind of relationship with our sexuality and with our bodies. It's just wonderful to play with. So,
well, I do think it's a hugely positive thing, and I think we do tend to demonize too much of it. And in fact, any of it is probably really much more counterproductive than people want it to be, because I think there are varying reasons to do it for people. And I don't see many very good reasons to demonize anything sexually. But I think growing up in the environment we grew up in, it's sometimes hard to break those tendencies. How do you get someone to break those tendencies?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I honor those tendencies. The first thing I do is I look at it and I'm like, all right, I start from perfection. And I think that's what One Taste and what the other schools, One Taste was born out of that's the school that I went to, but okay. There are other schools around it. Lafayette Morehouse essentially was kind of like the grandmother or grandfather of this theory, this work. And, but the belief is that we start with perfection. We look at, all right, who you are, what's happening with you in your life, where are you, what are the tendencies that you're doing, or what are the beliefs that you hold, and we honor them. We look at them, we say, oh, that's what you believe, interesting, just tell me more about what it's like having that belief or that relationship. So and I'll just say this, I've stopped working with people individually, and my focus and my goal now is to start to shift more towards doing just kind of bigger workshops and to help through my writing. So I'm less working with people one-on-one, just to be clear about that. But
when you would work with people one-on-one, how would that work? I mean, how does that, like, what would a session be there?
So I would work with people one-on-one, just to basically coaching. So there's no nudity when I was working with people. It's more, like I said, it's more about breaking down the stuff, or just looking at the stuff that's in the way of like, oh, you have this belief that because you're a man, you need to subscribe to these characteristics of what it means to be a man. And do you know that belief is actually getting in the way of you getting what you want? Can you see how you trying to accommodate the woman or the man, it could be gay or whatever, but like, do you see how you trying to give your partner what they want or what they think they want without actually honoring what you want or actually listening to them is building up resentment, and that's what's distancing you from connecting with them on an intimate level.
Okay, so even though there is a huge part of it that it relates directly to sexuality, it sounds like it's really working on the psychological level as much as anything else.
Definitely. I always say people come to me through the lens of sexuality, but it always opens up into every aspect of their life.
Does it have you had issues where people are, hyped up for the sexuality part of it and can't get that out of their heads? I mean, it seems like it's possible that someone might go into that going, hey, this ought to be a crazy experience. And then, you end up talking to them for an hour, and I'm sure what you're doing is helping them, but they may not realize it. So have you had that experience?
Well, the people that come to me that are like, hey, like, let's get sexy. They're automatically filtered. They're not for me. They're not they're not working. They're not here to actually work with me. And most of the time when they hear that I'm actually not going to get naked, or I'm not going to touch their genitals, or they're not going to touch my genitals, they don't want to work with me. So it's an automatic filter.
Well, that's good.
The people who have in the past, well, that's good based on good marketing and being clear in my energy and what I want and how I work. But the people that do want to work with me, they've always just been like, yep, I see what you do. I like it. Here's my money. And it's never been an issue. And the other way that I work or that I did work, or, I still like doing this aspect. So I'll work with couples. But if they want to learn the practice of orgasmic meditation, so there's coaching, there's like psychological coaching, and then there's actually teaching the practice. If people want to teach the practice or want to learn the practice, then if they're single, then I require them to find their own partner. I can't find a partner for them because technically that's pimping.
Yeah. There's some legal issues there too. Yeah.
So they find their own partner, and then I'll go through a series of clothed, experience, exercises, and they learn the practice in that form. And then when it comes to the woman, because the one person needs to be female bodied in this practice. I mean, there's other variations, but the primary one that I start with is female bodied. When it comes time for I'll just say, the woman to take off her pants or her skirt or whatever, I say, okay, I can either be in the room with you and I will verbally guide you. I won't touch you or anything, because again, that's a legal thing, but I won't touch you. Or I am happy to leave the room. You can have the experience, and then I'll come back in afterwards and we can discuss what happened. Or we could just not do it today at all, and you can go home and at a later date, and we can just follow up via email. And every time, the people are like, nope, let's just do it here right in front of you, because, I'm a nice person who knows what the fuck she's doing. So, it's great. And, so then I'll watch and I'll verbally guide through the process, and then we'll speak afterwards, and that's it. So
how long did it take before that felt like it was a natural thing to do with, having people in the room and you're just kind of watching and talking to them? Was there a hurdle for you?
It's funny. If there was a hurdle, it wouldn't be the one you expected, because for whatever reason, like you said, maybe because, based on you knowing me during that Keeping Abreast show, like I've always been just like, let's just put our tits out. If it's time to put our tits out, let's put our tits out. So for me, it wasn't a hurdle around, like, oh my God, there is a vagina. For me, I think it was more a hurdle of ego, because I was so willing to go there, and I could feel a lot, through acting. You learn, you already have a relationship with your animal body through acting. Because I had already developed these, I think I was a little too smart, and then that too smartness would come off as arrogance, or wouldn't actually fully connect me to them and what they needed. I had this idea. And so I had to do a lot of my own personal work to get really humble, and to get clear, and to be like, oh wait, I am not actually in charge here. I mean, I am, but I am, what's in charge is the orgasm that's being created between them and between us. And I need to respect and honor and follow that. And if someone isn't ready to go somewhere, I need to honor and respect that. Some people come in, they're like, come on, just do it. And it's like, people have defenses built up for a very, very specific reason. And you just really have to honor and go stroke by stroke, quite frankly, stroke by stroke towards their opening. And when they're ready, they'll let you know. They'll do it. They'll let you know. And anything else is just violence in my mind.
Yeah. Oh, I think I'd probably just be giggling the whole time for at least the first year.
Yeah.
And then I don't know where I would take it from. If I made it for a year, I guess I'd know something, but I don't know what that means.
That's a great thing to know about yourself. And that's why, there's a big, long coaching process where you're actually coaching with, or you're training people that are in the program with you. So you get the giggles out of your system. You get to know what the giggles are about. Like, are you feeling uncomfortable? Are you feeling embarrassed? What comes up when you feel that embarrassment? You get to know yourself through that. So.
Well, that's pretty, it sounds very, it sounds very healthy to be on either side of it. So that's totally. And safe and stuff. Do you think people, do you think there anybody out there who's abusing that privilege of being in the room, let's say?
I'm sure there is. I can't think of anyone. I have to say the organization that I went through, did a pretty good job of you gotta be very clean and clear with your stuff. I think there's a lot of people, I would just warn that there's a lot of people out there who are doing things under the name of Tantra, quote unquote. And, if anyone out there is listening to this program and is interested in connecting with themselves sexually or sexuality, I would just really say, feel yourself. How do you feel in the presence of this person when you're interviewing them? First of all, don't ever just step in and be like, let's get naked. Actually, you need to have a conversation with someone before you step into this process. How do you feel? Do you feel comfortable with them? Does something feel a little off? And if it does, mention it. You can say something feels off here, So,
there's a camera in the corner and the red light's on.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And also, thank God for the internet. There's a way now that you can Google this person's name and, are they reputable? Do they have, do they have, a great website with good things about them? Or is it kind of something kind of off, So I would say proceed with maybe, I don't know, for whatever reason, because this guy mentioned it and he was a friend of a friend. I just knew this is the place I need to go. And when I walked in, the energy felt good and clean in the way that I needed it to be clean, to feel safe to open that way. So
it says a lot for repeat business and referrals.
Yes.
Tell me about your book.
So the book I'm working on is called From 6 to 9 and Beyond. And, my point, or my whole, my desire in creating it, is to show the erotic awakening of 6 feminine archetypes. And my desire in showcasing these variations of women through archetypal means is to, first of all, reflect how each of us as women or as human beings has these archetypes within ourselves. So I didn't want to just write a book that was oh, look, that's an interesting journey of someone's sexuality. I wanted to write it in a way that said, oh, look, I see myself in that person and I now feel not alone and maybe even courageous enough to take the first steps on my own erotic journey. And I title it From 6 to 9 and Beyond because, first of all, we hear 69 and we start giggling, and that's fine. It's an acknowledgement of and an homage to our current relationship with sexuality. And my belief is, say, we're going from 6 to 9 because, say, maybe our current culture, if 6 is pornography and 9 is romance novels, that's basically and in the middle maybe there's abstinence. So that's basically our range of sexual education.
Wait, so 6 is pornography, 9 is romance novels, and somewhere around a 7 is abstinence?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know math, but that seems odd.
But the point is to say, this is our current range of sexuality, and that's where it is. And it's not to say anything is wrong or to shame it, but it's to say, let's take that and let's build on that. Let's go beyond that and show what else is possible when we talk about sex and when we talk about eros, and which is the root word of erotic. Because eros and the erotic isn't just about, again, genitals bunking. It is about the connection to our deepest fundamental creative impulses as human beings. Eros is present. I'm sure you've watched a performance of someone on stage they are so in the moment, and maybe they're not conventionally attractive, but you are attracted to them. You are like, there is energy, there's buzzing, or you'll watch dancers dance, and there's eros there's the erotic, there's you in the moment of creating art. That is eros, and that to me is erotic, and I want to portray that and use sexuality as a gateway into that world.
If 6 is pornography and 9 is romance novels and somewhere around 7 is abstinence, what's the goal number, and what does that represent to you?
I love that. There is no goal number, quite honestly. That's my point. Is like we're stuck in logos or logical ways of like goal-oriented sexuality. I banged a hot chick who maybe would be a number 9 on the pickup artist scale. I took her home. I fucked her. I ejaculated. I won the trophy. Like that's kind of how a lot of us believe. And for, and I know I'm talking kind of heteronormatively, like men are going for women, women going for men or whatever. And you can take this in any sort of relationship though. I think we're taught that.
That is pretty typical, mindset that we're kind of inundated with.
Exactly. And women are on the hunt for like, you better be marriage material. You better put a ring on it. Otherwise I'm not giving you the milk, and no one is just connecting to the sexuality or to their erotic animal being for their own pleasure of having a connection to your own animal erotic being. It's always for some goal. And that's the point, is to like, there is no goal, 6 to 9. How about 222? It's
I guess what I meant was more like, what is the beyond? Like, what is beyond those 3 that we talked about?
Great. I love that. Beyond is like a deep dive into who you are as a fundamental human being in relationship with all that is life.
Oh, so that goes way beyond sexuality.
Yes. And that's the point. In my book, because the first part of the book is more like essays and theory, which is probably what most people are accustomed to when they read my writing. It's essays and theory, and it's basically breaking down how the erotic and eros has been shoved into sexuality. So we're only allowed, quote unquote, allowed to experience the erotic in the form of the sexual. But what that does is that cuts us off from connecting to the erotic in every aspect of our lives.
So it is amazingly vast in what it represents, and just one small little gateway to that, I'm sure, is very helpful for a lot of people, and a gateway they probably don't even know exists.
Well, that's why, when we were talking about how I would work with people, they come to me through the lens of sexuality, but what they discover is that this is about them and their relationship to their own divine spirit, creative process, power, whatever that means to you.
You're like a benevolent Black Widow.
I've never been called that. I love it. Yes, I do kill for the benefit of all humanity. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Are you still active in doing performing out there?
I am actually. I took a few years off, like I said, to kind of dive into my coaching process, do my own healing, all that kind of stuff, and just this past May, I was like, well, San Francisco has a community going on. So let me jump back into that. And last September, I picked up an agent here, and I've been doing, quite a number of commercial work. And just yesterday, I auditioned for the Theater Bay Area general auditions where, all the Bay Area theaters come, and for 3 days, watch a bunch of people pretend to be other people.
Well, it sounds like it's all coming back together.
Yeah. And it does. Like the two have really infused each other. The spiritual and the dive into myself, into my own erotic being, and through my writing as well, has certainly informed who I am as a performer. It's made me more vulnerable. It's made me more present. It's made me more grounded. It's made me more receptive. It's made me more humble, quite frankly. Just really like, oh, wow, the profundity of these human beings that I get to portray for this short time right now in this moment. What a blessing. What an honor. Like, let me really do justice and just drop into that.
Good for you.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm happy for you, everything you're doing, and all the things that you've discovered about yourself and how you're putting it all together in new and fun ways.
Thank you so much. And I just want to put out there, if anyone wants to learn more about my book or even pre-order it, you can visit the website from 629andbeyond.com. Again, that's from 629andbeyond.com. And it's the numbers 6 and the numbers 9. So it's not written out. It's actual numerical 6 and 9.
And so, we'll put up a link on the site in the show notes for this episode. And how else do people keep in touch with you? You have like 6 websites and at least a Twitter or 2.
I'll try to keep it brief.
No, go ahead. Let them all out there.
Well, everyone can find anything they need to know about me on my blog, which is theorgasmiclife.com. And there's links to, again, the book. There's links to my Facebook page. There's links to my Twitter page. My Twitter account is Candace Holdorf. Pretty easy. There's links to that. And then there's a link to my acting page, which is CandaceHoldorf.com. And you can see my resume and my reels. And if you're looking to hire and you're in the Bay Area, or hell, I'll go to LA, I'll go to New York, I go where the work is,
You suffer for your art.
I do. Well, I thrive. Actually, I thrive for my art. That's what I try to say. I try to get rid of like the suffering artist. I'm like, no, I'm a thriving artist. I thrive for my art.
I'm stealing that.
Great. Take it. Spread it. I love it.
Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time and being just so generous, with me and just being such a beautiful, creating a beautiful space for me to come and kind of let all of myself out. You create a beautiful space for that, and I appreciate it.
Wow, I feel really good about it. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I made it. I survived. And as it turns out, it was far more informative and also far more comfortable than I thought it would be. I think that's a testament to Candace and how she approaches what can be sensitive material and does it in a way that certainly isn't threatening at all. So I learned something, and I'm always so impressed and have a lot of respect for somebody who takes a difficult situation and turns it into a situation where they're not only helping themselves, but they're helping other people. So she gets a lot of praise in my book. If you want to keep in touch with her, she's on Twitter at Candace Holdorf, CandiceHoldorf. Her website is pretty much the same thing, just CandaceHoldorf.com, same spelling applies. If you want to find out more about her book, go to from629andbeyond.com. That's the number 6 and the number 9, and all these links will be up on the website in the show notes for this episode. And if you want to catch her blog, she's at theorgasmiclife.com. Thanks to Candace for a great conversation. I look forward to hearing more great stuff from you, and keep doing what you do. All right, that about does it for another edition of Bring Your Own Lunch. Glad you can join us. Of course, we got to thank Banuba, banuba.net, Banooba. They are the folks that provide the music that you're hearing right now. Go check them out online, download some of their music. Go see them live. They're fantastic live. Just do it. It's worth it. And of course, don't forget to go to our website, bringyourownlunch.com. Find out all the information about not just this show, but all of the previous episodes and the previous guests and all the fun we've had up until now. Because if you're new to it, boy, we've done a lot of stuff, and I don't know where you've been, but catch up, would you? Send me a personal email, Dave at bringyourownlunch.com. Follow us on Twitter at BYOL Podcast. You can like us on Facebook, facebook.com/bringyourownlunch. You can, of course, follow us on Instagram. That's always fun. And please go to iTunes or Stitcher and rate, review, subscribe to this show because we need your help to get the word out there. I think we're doing good stuff. We'll keep doing good stuff. We just need a little bit of help from you to let people know that we're doing good stuff. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. I want it to make sense. Stay tuned for Jimmy Jack's Cowpunch Hour, followed by Mansoor and the Fish. And until next week, when I have another great guest lined up, this is Dave. I'll see you next Tuesday. We have to wait another year for more Downton.